Hello. We're going to talk about how to interrupt your friends the right way. This is one of the early skills, again, in the program, one of the early pivotal skills. And as we build these building blocks, these conversation skills will lead to more advanced skills. But certainly, when we are engaged in a conversation with our friends, the idea is that there is turn taking in that process. And for that to really happen, people cannot continue to interrupt one another. So, in order to break that down, we use a few visuals to help the children understand that when you see the stop sign, of course, that means you're not supposed to be doing something, and in this case, it's interrupting. So the stop sign is always a good visual to use when you want to communicate to the child up front that, wait a minute, stop and think, or stop and wait a moment. Of course, the next one is the symbol for being quiet. And then we have the clock and the number 2. And that's for teaching the children to try to wait for about 2 seconds after their friend stops talking before they jump in. And that's because when you really think about it, the exchange that occurs between two people in a conversation, the flow of it, it's a very it's an art almost, and we take it for granted. But we learn it early on in life and all throughout our school years, and how to wait for that subtle pause and to jump right in. And if you're really good at it, you tend to be able to get in quicker than maybe someone who's not, who's a little bit hesitant. But for a lot of the kids that we work with, they just jump right in and they don't wait. And we'll talk about why that might be the case too. But right now, as far as developing the concept and the skill around it, we ask the children to stop and wait for 2 seconds. 1, 2, and then you can jump right in. Now, when we role model this, we're in control of the environment. So the person who was talking knows that their friend is about to say something because I'm counting 1, 2. But the idea is that we take this and then we generalize it into game time and play time, and we will use smaller visuals to help with that process. This one is there's 2 kinds of visuals that your lesson plan might come with. Personally, I think this one works pretty well. It's a miniature version, but it just basically has the message across. And sometimes I even will put this on the floor where the children are hanging out, talking and playing, and all we need to do is point at it. And it just reminds them that they need to wait for 2 seconds. And of course, the other visual sign that we give is using the fingers and counting for 2. And so the idea is that the children, it just slows them down a bit. And we use this. It's also one of the first lessons that is usually taught when we do larger groups, because we want everybody to understand that they're supposed to also listen to the instructor when they're presenting the lesson. So it's a good adult tool to use with the children, but it's also a friendship building skill. So a few years ago, I worked with a group of children, and actually over a number of years, and this was one of the early skills. And after a couple of years of working with them, and they're on some really advanced skills now, conversation, friendship skills, emotional management, compromising, and really some more advanced executive functioning skills within friendship management. And yet at times they were still interrupting one another. So I remember one session we kind of just stopped, and I had to ask them, a few times, what was it? Why were they so driven to interrupt their friends? I tried to explain to them the social cost that it could have, because you don't like to be interrupted, and of course, if you're interrupting your friend, they can get annoyed, and if you keep doing it, it becomes you become annoying as a friend. And we might not be that direct, but we really try to help the children understand that there's a social cost to this, that it's just not a free for all. In any case, the children, it helped me understand. Actually, all of them. There were 7 children, ranging from extremely high functioning. Maybe the diagnosis would be pervasive developmental disorder, NOS, or high level Aspergers, all the way right down to on a higher level of moderate autism. So a fair variety of children in the room, 7 of them, and to every one of them, when I gave them a time, was able to explain that it wasn't that they didn't understand the skill, but they had some real anxiety around forgetting what they wanted to say. And so then, after taking a week or two to think about that, it became a little more obvious that for some children, the fear of forgetting what you want to say, and basically addressing that by interrupting. So when you interrupt, you can't forget what you just want to say because you just said it. So you got it out there. So you avoided that forgetting experience. So the avoidance of the forgetting experience could be more rewarding or reinforcing than what the perceived social benefit would be if you did not interrupt. And that seemed to be driving a lot of the children's behavior. So on the one hand, this is a good skill to teach. On the other hand, there might be or there's likely additional skills that need to be developed for the children to be able to really be more comfortable not interrupting, knowing that they have a way to remember something important that they want to say. So it's really another lesson in all that, but I will quickly mention that we developed an approach where the child would think of the thing they really wanted to say and come up with a visual in their mind. And then I would quickly draw the visual. Now, it's not that they couldn't draw it. This was a bit of time saving. There were 7 children in there, but they had to come up with the topic or the thing they really wanted to talk about, and they had to come up with their own visuals. So, for example, one boy was in a parade, and he said he was in the back of a pickup truck waving his baseball hat. So that's the quick drawing that I did. That was a representation of his memory of that item. And then I basically did all the drawings, a drawing for each child, for each topic they wanted to bring up. And then I covered it up. And I said, let's wait 45 minutes. And then if you can remember it, then we can talk about it. So after about 45 minutes, at the end of the lesson, I asked each one of the children, do you remember what you wanted to talk about? And as it turns out, all 7 of the children remembered exactly what they wanted to talk about. And they couldn't see the visual. I had to cover it up. So them forming the visual, first of all, and then me having a representation of it, I'm not really sure which one carried more weight, but we did both. But they didn't use the visual after they came up with it because I had it hidden. So this story would be pretty cool, just like that. But then 7 days later, they came back, and I noticed that I just noticed that the sheet was still up and the visuals were all covered, that my drawings were still covered. So as they gathered around, I said, just for kicks, no pressure. I'm just kind of curious, who would remember the thing you really wanted to talk about last week that they got to eventually talk about, but who could remember that thing they were trying to hold on to, that memory. And I thought maybe a couple of guys would perhaps maybe remember. It blew me away when all 7 of them remembered exactly the topic that they wanted to talk about. So the idea is that we were kind of scratching the surface here on some skill development around holding on to your thought. It's an executive functioning skill, but holding on to your thought. And if you can hold on to your thought, then you have a much better chance of not interrupting and following this skill and social rule. Thanks.